My name is Naeem Maska, and I'm a Senior Partner Solution Architect specializing in SAP. And today with me, I have Vamsi. Vamsi, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, thanks, Naeem. So my name is Vamsi Yanamadala. I'm also a partner solution architect here at AWS. And one of the most exciting things about my role is getting to work with our consulting partners to develop as well as deliver innovative solutions to real-world customer challenges. And today we're going to focus on sustainability. When we talk to chief sustainability officers, one of the first concerns they have is really tracking their carbon emissions throughout their business. And within the tracking, their major concerns are, is the tracking complete? Meaning, are they tracking it truly end to end? And also, is it accurate? In some cases, in the future, there will be financial penalties for inaccurate reporting of your sustainability metrics. And then one of the main roles of a chief sustainability officer is to identify areas within that business to focus decarbonization efforts. So they may have new initiatives in certain parts of the business, and without that key data and accurate data, it's very difficult to define and really improve the decarbonization across the business.
Okay, so Vamsi, I guess carbon accounting is really key to understanding your total greenhouse gas emissions. So let's talk about that a bit more.
Yeah, so the way to kind of look at carbon accounting is that it is similar to financial accounting,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately it's a method of tracking and reporting your CO2 equivalent or carbon intensity from all of your business activities.
Right.
And so when we look at kind of the value chain here, we have in the middle our reporting company in orange. So that would
Mm-hmm.
be kind of all of the CO2 emissions that we're trying to capture from within the four walls of our business. But
Mm-hmm.
we're also going to have upstream and downstream that we need to capture as well.
Right.
So upstream would be anything from like vendors and suppliers. Downstream would be really anything to get our product into the hands of our customers. When we look, there's a standard from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol that really breaks down the measurement of the CO2 emissions into three scopes.
Right.
And when we look at scope one, that's defined as the direct emissions, and really it's the emissions produced from company-owned facilities as well as vehicles. So you can think of it as warehouses that we may operate, manufacturing plants,
Mm-hmm.
even fleet vehicles
Right.
would
Right.
all really be in that scope one definition, and that's where we should capture all of that, all of the
So things
emissions.
like offices as well, for example,
Correct,
would come
correct.
into play, right? Okay, offices and so on, right? I'm with you. Okay.
So, and then next, let's take a look at scope two. Scope two is the indirect emissions that is generated from the purchase of energy. So when we look at what does it take to, in terms of electricity to power our plants, maybe we have heating and cooling, maybe we have even steam as part of our process. So all of the energy ultimately that we need to run our operations is defined as the scope two emissions.
So all of that energy consumption, gas, steam, um, fossil fuel, any fossil fuel consumption to produce energy, right?
Correct, correct.
Yes.
So a good example is, let's say we are purchasing our electricity from a provider that offers a 100% fossil fuel, or in some cases they may have plans where they have 20% renewable energy, and in that you're actually reducing your carbon footprint in that scope two category.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I'm with you. Okay.
And then let's take a look at scope three. So scope three is basically all other indirect emissions generated both upstream as well as downstream. So taking a look at upstream, we're going to really it's all about working with our suppliers and vendors and them shipping or transporting the product to us. So their product to us. So that'll come in the form of delivery or you know, boats. I mean, any sort of transportation that we need to measure all of that. But it can also include things like business travel. So if we're meeting with our suppliers and vendors, that should also be captured in the upstream scope 3 category. Then we also have activities on the downstream side. So again, things to get our products in the hands of our customers. So the
Right,
whole
right.
sales and distribution piece is comes into play. So we're going to have potentially meeting with our customers or our distributors. So again, business travel may fall into there, but also everything to transport. So it could be rail, could be boat, could be trucks, or a combination of to get our products to the end customers. Another interesting area to consider is also there's always an end of life treatment that may be
Right.
part of our product life cycle. And in those cases, the recycling and bringing back a product and then tearing it down, the emissions generated from that should also be included in our scope 3.
And repurposing as well, like if we're going to repurpose some of those parts that we're actually retrieving back from customers, things like that would also be need to be accounted for as well, right?
Correct, correct. And ultimately, I mean, this is we could spend a lot longer kind of going into some of the
Yeah,
examples of
yeah,
scope 1, 2, and 3, but I think the key takeaway is one, measuring all of this completely and accurately is a challenge. Is it's
yeah.
not an easy task. But for the takeaway for our purposes here, scope 1 plus scope 2 plus scope 3 ultimately equals our total carbon intensity.
Right. That's a
And
good way to summarize it, actually. Yeah,
exactly.
equals total GHG, or as you put it, greenhouse carbon intensity.
Correct, correct. And next, I think we can take a look, right, at how to, we've defined kind of the challenges here and
Mm-hmm.
in terms of a business sense, but let's maybe take a look at that technical architecture that uh, we can start building for our customers that will really help them start to accurately and completely track all of their CO2 emissions.
Okay, so when we're talking about a carbon data lake, we need to actually identify the sources of information that we're going to actually pull into our carbon data lake. So, first off, when we were talking about carbon accounting, you remember Vamsi explained scope, CO2 emissions in terms of scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. The data was coming from so many different sources potentially. So, let's actually look at our SAP system or our system of record, which probably would be SAP, but it could be another ERP system. So we'll say, ECC as an example, S4 HANA maybe, even Rise with SAP could be your system of record, right? And then once we have accounted for those, we're looking at other third-party systems that may be deployed within your organization. It could be relational databases. It could be a third-party data lake that you may have. So let me just drop a database in here. So Oracle, Postgres, Aurora, for example, and then even a third-party data lake.
Yeah, Naeem. And the way to kind of look at this is, your SAP systems may contain a part of the overall manufacturing that's occurring, and you need to pull data from there. But
Yeah.
oftentimes we find there's other business applications at the shop floor level where you may have a historian system, you may have other applications that are involved in your manufacturing process, as well as you may even have a document management system that's going to store a lot of your PDFs and other sort of data captures that we also want to use in our carbon data lake.
Exactly, exactly. So, in addition to those, you could have IoT devices, maybe on a manufacturing floor, maybe applied to your fleet of vehicles, for example. So let's drop IoT in. And we have a number of services that can support the ingesting, sorry, IoT devices, things like IoT Core, even Amazon Kinesis with Firehose to actually pull that mass amount of IoT data into your Carbon Data Lake. And then going forwards, there will be other third-party sources, and this could be more around API data coming from third-party APIs, for example. So let me give you, that could be climate data, for example. It could be oceanic data, any kind of data, even data from your travel agencies. Remember Vamsi mentioned as well, when you're booking a flight, it gives you your CO2 calculation for that flight you're booking. So you may be pulling in data from all different types of sources, but that would be API driven. So you can do that on AWS either via directly calling the API through Lambda, for example, or even if you're looking to collect all those APIs into a unified API, you could actually deploy the API gateway to help you with that.
Absolutely. So now, Naeem, now that we've kind of defined these, kind of multiple areas within the IT enterprise where we need to really, the first step after we've kind of identified where the data is stored is defining kind of that integration extraction piece from these applications, as well as kind of how do we, enrich that data, right, for the purposes of what we need. But first, starting with extraction, what are some of the tools and capabilities we have in kind of pulling from this variety of data sources?
Good point. So we've identified the groups, I guess, and then when it comes to pulling data from an SAP system, we have Amazon AppFlow. So let me just drop that in. That can actually pull data from an SAP system using SAP OData. So I'll just draw that in right here, like this.
Yeah, and specifically Amazon AppFlow is interesting. So it provides actually not just for SAP, but multiple SaaS application connectors.
That's right.
And it makes it very easy. It's a managed service, so you define your connection and your data elements that you want to pull out from your applications. And specifically in the case of SAP, using the OData protocol, it's able to use the business logic that's within SAP and pull that data from the application level.
Yeah, and you can see I've dropped AppFlow in, and I've also dropped in an S3 bucket. So AppFlow is pulling data from SAP and is dropping it into our S3 bucket, which is like our initial all our raw data will go into an S3 bucket or a collection of S3 buckets before we push it through our data pipeline. Now, when we're talking about third-party data, we have AWS Glue to help support that. So let me drop that in for you right here as well. And that can connect to many different sources. You can create your own custom connectors. It already has connectors for third-party databases and even SAP HANA as well. So we'll drop that in. So that's Glue. And again, you could push that data to an S3 bucket. We'll just draw that in here. Glue. Okay. And then with IoT, as I mentioned earlier, you've got a number of IoT support services and stuff, including Amazon Firehose Kinesis. And when it comes to API, we have API Gateway, but you can also call the APIs directly from within your code, all your applications that are deployed on AWS.
So that's great. I think that staging bucket really becomes that what feeds kind of this data pipeline, right? Where we're going to cleanse and enrich our data. What does that start to look like, or what are the makings of a data pipeline on AWS?
Okay, so for the data pipeline, we need to orchestrate the data pipeline, and this is where AWS Step Functions comes in. And you can see I've got this pink box, and this is where AWS Step Functions is going to manage that pipeline and orchestrate the different steps within that pipeline. And as Vamsi mentioned, one of the first things we need to think about is data cleansing, right? So we have a service called AWS Glue Data Brew, which I'm just going to drop in right here for you. And this can help you with your cleansing requirements and alerting workflow. So you can actually alert users in terms of maybe there needs to be a manual check to ensure that the data being cleansed is as expected. So you can actually utilize this service to help you with that cleansing workflow. We'll call it data brew. The other thing to point out here is as we're going through the pipeline, we're going to be staging the data as it goes through the various stages in an S3 bucket. So intermediate, so this may be temporary, for example, just to actually get it through that pipeline. The other thing to point out here is there may be many steps within that pipeline. I've just simplified it, but you can say, you know, there could be many other steps to get that data into the format that you're looking to get it into. Once you have it into that format, or you have it into the in the format that you actually want in terms of calculating CO2 emissions, you can then actually use functions or services like AWS Lambda to go ahead and actually calculate the CO2 emissions based on the data that's in the intermediate bucket like we have here. So we have Lambda, it will calculate the CO2 emissions, and then once it's done, it will deploy that. You can then save that to an enriched bucket, and I will explain the purpose of the enriched bucket in a second. So we have another bucket, and this is enriched data. So the data's gone through that pipeline, it's gone through various multiple stages, it's got to AWS Lambda, which calculates the CO2 emissions for you, and then saves the results into your enriched bucket.
So the next step, right, Naeem, is now that we have this data stored, this enriched data really stored, how do we start to consume this, right? How do we put it in the hands of our sustainability department, as well as any additional business users that should really be aware of this? And when we look at some of the capabilities there's Amazon QuickSight, which is our business analytics tool, which will help you build dashboards and create those reports that are really necessary for different personas. Additionally, SAP has within the SAP Analytics Cloud a sustainability control tower, as well as Invisi, and there's multiple other partners out there, but ultimately they focus on really pre-built sustainability dashboards that really help you get started very quickly, as well as a series of any other third-party partners, things like Tableau, Click, any other BI reporting tool is going to have the ability to connect to this S3 bucket and really visualize this information and report against it.
So as a quick summary, Vamsi, we're pulling in our data from all the different sources that we need to, based on our Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 requirements to calculate that to help us calculate that the total carbon intensity. We're then ingesting it using a number of AWS services. We're pushing it through our pipeline. We're cleansing that data. There may be a number of iterations. We're then calculating the CO2 emissions and dropping that into an enriched S3 bucket ready for reporting. And as Vamsi mentioned, we have Amazon QuickSight. There are obviously a number of third-party products for reporting on data and so on, so such as SAP Analytics Cloud, Invisi, and so on.
Yep. And normally we would stop here and say that we have built a carbon data lake. But I think over the last year, we've seen really with generative AI really coming into the scene, what are some areas that we can use generative AI to really enhance and have additional capabilities, sitting in our carbon data lake?
Yeah.
And one of the first things that we find is when it comes to sustainability, where you produce your product and where your product is consumed has any number of governing bodies
Right.
that have different regulations, different requirements, and ultimately necessitates the need for a business rules engine. So something
Right.
that can really codify and capture all of those requirements. And there are off-the-shelf solutions out there. There's even open source solutions, but ultimately what we've seen is alongside this carbon data lake, there is a business rules engine now that is really codified with all of those regulatory requirements. And where Gen AI comes in is using services like Amazon Bedrock you're able to take those documents and those regulations that are typically 70, 100-page PDFs and parse them through Amazon Bedrock, and ultimately through multiple phases using generative AI, get to a scenario where a new regulation or a new quarterly update happens, and you're able to update your business rules engine very quickly. And how that happens is it takes that PDF and ultimately through the Gen AI model or the foundational model will bring to you the exact JSON or XML format that your business rules engine needs, recommended and suggested updates.
Brilliant. So again, we're actually bringing in the power of Gen AI. And the other thing to mention here is that even in the data pipeline process, Gen AI may be a valuable asset in terms of helping you to cleanse that data and get it through that data pipeline, right?
Correct. So, I mean, one of the key areas was kind of what I mentioned earlier around the document management system. Um, Typically speaking, you're going to need to use services like Textract and be able to convert a PDF into text to then pass into a Gen AI model, which can then, perform any number of actions or follow on from there. So, incorporating Gen AI into your data pipeline is something we see very commonly, in addition to the business rule scenario, as well as the final one we'll talk about is within QuickSight. There's Amazon Q, which allows you to take that data and represent it in the ways that make it very simple for different users and different profiles. So Q for QuickSight has the features such as executive summary. It even does some storyboarding and is able to you can interrogate that data and ask a natural language question, and Q will be able to go through that data and give you a natural response to your question.
Brilliant. So look, just to summarize, we've covered carbon accounting and the requirements for carbon accounting based on the greenhouse gas protocols, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. We've kind of demonstrated how you can bring that data into an AWS carbon data lake using using some of our servers to actually ingest that data, drop it into S3 buckets, push it through a data pipeline to get it to the point where you're happy with it and it's enriched. We've even looked at how you can report with on top of that data using Amazon QuickSight, even Q with Amazon QuickSight. And then we've highlighted some of the Gen AI use cases within this to help you manage your rules with changing regulatory requirements taking place on a regular basis. How do you keep your rules engine and the management of all your data up to date? So with that said, Vamsi, thank you very much for joining me. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yep, absolutely.
Brilliant. See you then.